Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Poor Richard's Cafe and Star Local Media. Poor Richard's Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Poor Richard's Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. I'm Matt Welch, being joined by Devin Hassan and Taylor Ragland. Gentlemen, let's play a little school year in review. I guess as we get closer and closer to shifting gears into summer mode, where I guess over the next few weeks we'll kind of scatter about some spring football roundup podcasts and some school year in review podcasts. So let's take the time to look at a few markets that have already closed the book on the 2018-19 school year. Plano, Rowlett, and Mesquite. Let's look back on the highs, the lows, the standout moments, the standout athletes, just basically our encapsulation of what we have been covering within these three markets over the last school year. So Devin, it's a lot on your plate for this podcast, Devin. So let's versus us starting with Plano and then giving the entire floor to you for both Rowlett and Mesquite. We'll give you a little bit of a break. So whether it's Rowlett or Mesquite, which one do you want to start with as far as kind of recapping the school year that was for one of your core markets?
Well, out in Rowlett and Sachse both once again put together big all-around seasons. Sachse, all 8 standing-based teams made the playoffs. That's the first time in school history that they've done that, which is surprising with as much success as Sachse has had. But they always had kind of one weak link. Our all-area coach of the year in boys basketball, Zach Mikesell, got that boys basketball program turned around. They made the playoffs for the first time in 3 years. And then the other teams just kind of did what they do, what they've done for the last few years. I mean, they won district championships in volleyball, football, girls cross country, girls basketball, girls soccer, baseball, and they finished second in 6 other sports. I mean, they're just right there at the top of the list all the way across. Phenomenal all-around athletic program. In Rowlett, some people kind of think they're taking a step back. They still have 7 playoff teams of the 8 standing-based sports. Their boys basketball team, which has actually been one of their staples in recent years, kind of had a down year. They finished 5th, so they were just out of the running. But outstanding all-around year for Rowlett. Their boys soccer team, I think, was probably the highlight of their group, winning their first district championship since 2004. But listen to some of these streaks for Rowlett as far as their playoff runs go. Volleyball, 22 years. Football, 14 years. Girls soccer, 17 years. Boys soccer, 17 years. Softball, 15 years. Baseball, 20 years. I mean, that's just a model of consistency out there.
Absolutely.
And obviously they're competing against the other Garland ISD schools, so they don't have a lot of mixing in with some of the others. Obviously, Wiley joined them this year, but those things are cyclical. You look at the other Garland ISD programs, and they have some good stretches and they have some bad stretches. Or Rowlett has just been a model of consistency in terms of performance and the ability to make the playoffs. So another outstanding year for Rowlett as well.
I guess so. I mean, it sounds like that's just between Sachse and Rowlett, it's like death taxes in those two schools lording over Garland ISD.
It has been of recent years, and that's just we get into all sorts of different factors, but they're the 2 newest schools, if you'll say that. So they've had the most population growth out there. That's where the new if you're looking to move to Garland ISD, you want to live in Rowlett or Sachse a lot of times, just because that's where the growth is, that's where the newer developments is. But the coaching staffs out there are very stable too. You look at some of the coaches at Sachse, Red Barons at football coach, Ricky Jones at volleyball, Donna McCullough at girls basketball, Chris Burrow in baseball. These are all coaches that have been there since it opened in 1992. 2002. They didn't become a varsity program until 2004. And even at Rowlett, Paul Carmen, the baseball coach, has been there since it opened. Clark McMurtry, the boys soccer coach, has been there since it opened. This is back in 1996. So we're going back almost 25 years. And so, when you have that kind of stability within your program, you can kind of, you have your system in place for those feeder schools. And people always talk about the football feeder schools. Well, the feeder schools go back in all sports. It doesn't matter what it is. So when you have that kind of stability in the coaching ranks, it leads a lot to success later on.
Oh yeah.
So when you think back to, with as consistent as these two programs were this past school year, is there any one team or one moment or one game or one athlete that just kind of is going to kind of stick with you when you think back to the 2018-19 school year for Rowlett and Sachse?
And this is a game that I believe you were present for, the Sachse girls basketball.
It might have been. I was not there for that one. It might have been you.
Might have been
Actually,
Taylor,
It was Taylor. But anyway, this is a team that has won 55 district games in a row.
Yeah.
They made the state tournament a year ago, and a narrow loss to Converse Judson in the state semifinals, and they returned their entire starting five. And I mean, really had that look of a team that could win a state championship.
Oh yeah.
And they go back and forth with Allen in that regional quarterfinal game, and Allen, was led for the most part. Sachse kept making run after run after run. They finally kind of got over that hump, grabbed a 1-point lead, and I believe it was a putback on a rebound with
the shortest player on the floor.
As time
by Allen's 5'1" backup point guard.
as time expires, and obviously Allen goes on, to make the state tournament and whatnot. But I think that kind of what could have been moments. I thought that Sachse team was really poised. Garland ISD has never won a state championship in basketball, and only recently with the South Garland boys and the Sachse girls that they even made the state tournament. Naaman Forest had a couple swims a few years ago, and Lakeview had a swim a while back. But it's always been near misses for them. But I really felt this Sachse team had the potential to win it all, and I still believe that they're one of the top teams in the state.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes that one little bounce to the shortest girl on the floor, and she sinks the shot, comes through under pressure.
It's just how the brackets were aligned, because if you were just to power rank those teams just from best to worst or whatnot, I mean, even though Sachse went down in the third round, that's still a team that very well, if they had won that game, had all reason to believe that could be the team that got back to state.
Yeah.
It was just one of those matchups for sure. Yeah. And I definitely like your point about continuity with Sachse and Rowlett as far as the coaching staffs, because Lake Dallas we're not going to talk about today, but you look at programs like that where it seems like every year in some of those sports they're looking for different coaches. Volleyball will have had 4 in 4 years. I mean, it's hard to establish momentum and go and there's no moment, there's no continuity, there's no momentum or anything. So some of those coaching careers out there are impressive and crazy for sure to be at one place that long and have that much success.
Let's see. Let's talk. Let's try to make heads and tails out of Plano in the year that was in Plano ISD athletics. As far as just pure district championships. Now, if we're going to talk, so if you were to look at Plano ISD through the lens of strictly how they performed in the 8 standings-based sports, your volleyballs, your footballs, basketball, soccer, baseball, softball, you started off on almost the highest of highs with the Plano West volleyball team catching fire in the playoffs, going all the way to the state tournament, and then that same postseason you had Plano Senior going to the third round. So volleyball, they aced it. Plano ISD, great year on the volleyball court. Elsewhere, it was a little
bumpy.
At least in those standings-based sports, left a little bit to be desired on the whole. Beyond the Plano Senior girls basketball team going 3 rounds deep. You had teams in Plano West. The boys basketball team won a first-round matchup, and so did the girls soccer team. Softball, West and Plano each won first-round matchups. So you had nobody else get to the regional tournament beyond Plano girls basketball and Plano volleyball and Plano West volleyball. But then you turn and then you look at those solo sports, the cross countries, the tracks, the tennises, golf, and whatnot. And I mean, Plano ISD lit it up almost in every single one of those sports. Because as far as just pure district champions went in 2018-19, there was only one across those the standings-based sports, and that was Plano West softball, which we just finished going undefeated in that district run. And then you had Plano East boys track, Plano West tennis, Plano West girls golf, Plano West boys golf,
both golf.
Plano West boys cross country. So again, a lot of those solo sports is where PISD did the bulk of its damage in 2018-19. That's where all of their state champions came from as well, be it Ashlyn Hilliard winning state cross country for Plano Senior last fall, and then just recently, I guess last week or whatnot, Cade Morcat and Emma Jenner winning a state championship in mixed doubles for Plano West. And then you think back to wrestling season, and 2 state champions emerged from Plano West as well, with Ashley Leakus and Tegan Jamison. I hope I'm saying that first name right.
I believe you are, and that's a program that I really have my eye on in the coming years. Plano West wrestling. Not saying they're going to challenge Allen. I mean, Allen is Allen. It is what it is. But as far as kind of that tier of programs, maybe they may jump up and kind of be somewhat near that competitive level, because obviously, as you said, a couple medals this season, and a lot of people at the state tournament, really good performance as a team, both, especially on the boys side. So, there's a culture brewing there. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be Allen. Yeah. Nobody in the state of Texas for the last decade plus has been Allen. As far as wrestling,
not many teams in America are Allen when it comes to wrestling.
That doesn't happen. Yeah. Allen is the outlier of all outliers, but Plano West wrestling is certainly going somewhere and trending upward.
So let's talk about Plano West volleyball, because this was the program that, above all else in Plano ISD, mounted the most impressive season in terms of just the end game result. Going to the state semifinals. When you consider how the start of the year began with just the abrupt coaching situation and whatnot, with Justin Waters taking over for Brittany Bridge, and a team that had a lot of promise coming into the year, went through its ups and downs in that district, as you'd expect. That was a really good district. But again, Taylor, you covered this team start to finish. Just what was your read on this team as they were making their run to state?
I mean, it was one long up, one long down, and then one more really, really long up, because in non-district play, it seemed like they were beating everybody. They were, predicted to make the state tournament, have a shot at winning the state championship. Justin Waters, I think, was a really good fit. The talent there, off the charts, really good program. And then they hit a skid. Yeah. It were, be it the egos, maybe the overinflation of the cranium, maybe a little bit. I don't know for sure. Justin Waters talked a lot about how practices got a little sloppier. They were kind of rolling out there and just kind of expecting to win volleyball matches. And Prosper obviously took that district by storm, had a really, really good year, and ended up meeting Plano West in the postseason. And I think a couple of matches against Prosper were really definitive of the turnaround, the eventual run. The first time in district play, they got just swamped by Prosper at their place. And then they got beat again, near the end of district play, and I believe that was the game Prosper actually ended up clinching the district championship. But that was a 5-set thriller, really, really great match, a couple of really powerhouse teams. Then they ended up meeting in the postseason again. Plano West got the best of Prosper, and that really kind of signaled that this team had gotten back on track as far as doing what they had to do in addition to their talent to win some matches. And obviously it resulted in a run all the way to the state semifinals. They ran into a buzzsaw there, but just an incredible year. Like I said, I think Justin Waters is a good fit. They thought so too. Obviously they slashed the interim tag off. He'll be the head coach for the foreseeable future. I don't see them really going anywhere. They bring back a ton of talent, a bunch of their pieces, pretty much all of them. So I expect more from them in the future. But yeah, definitely the best run as far as the standings-based sports this season. And I think the beginning of the year and the end of the year are more indicative of what that program is and can be than the slump they went through. I think it was just a product of kind of a young team in places, not being able to really handle the hype and the expectations and falling flat a little bit. But obviously they figured it out, and yeah, it was a fun run to cover for sure. Very
akin to Sachse, when Sachse made the state tournament, last year and whatnot, with this Plano West volleyball team returning its core of Jill Presley, Aman Njai, and should be on that short list of teams that should be in contention for a spot in Garland next fall. Let's see. So yeah, as far as some of the solo sports and what Plano ISD accomplished, one of the and this was very recent, covering track and whatnot, but the resurgence of the Plano East track program and what they were able to accomplish, especially on the boys' side, winning their first district championship in quite some time. It was a team that was very much kind of on the come up over the years, making steady gains. I think it was right when head coach Jerry Gardner got to Plano East that I think you said his first year they finished last in the district meet, and then 3 years later, here they are, hoisting a district championship and doing so with a very veteran, senior-laden core of a lot of those same guys were stars on the football field. But you look at the way it culminated for them with Tyler Owens, advancing to state. So Tyler Owens solidifying his place as perhaps the fastest athlete to ever pass through Plano East by placing second in the 100. And I mean, you wonder just any other year what it looks like for Tyler Owens in state if he's not going up against the generational sprinter, of Matthew Bowling of Houston Strake Jesuit. But just a terrific season for Tyler Owens for the Plano East track program in general. And the girls team finished second in district, and they were able to get a relay out to state. It's a really young team, and they're definitely one to keep an eye on going down the road. But then you think of a sport like swimming. Plano East boys swimming. They won their first district title in a long time under first-year head coach Allison Sweeney. Plano West tennis keeping its just torrid consistency afloat as one of the premier programs in the state. They did get tripped up up in the postseason a little bit earlier than usual, advancing only to the regional semifinals. I mean, this is a team that had been to state that had quite a nice little run of state tournament appearances that got snapped by eventual state champion Round Rock Westwood. But they were really successful in the spring, as I mentioned, with Caden Mortgat and Emma Jenner winning state in mixed doubles. You had Plano Senior, that got a team to the state tennis tournament in Edward Steen and Herman Aguirre, and a team that kind of surprised is they probably weren't on that radar to begin the postseason. They didn't win the district tournament, I should say, and they didn't win the regional tournament. They finished second at district and had to qualify for state via playback, at regionals. But then they go ahead and they advance all the way to the state semifinals once they get there. So it's always nice to see those teams that kind of come out of the woodwork, just that weren't necessarily on the radar to begin the postseason, but really end up, doing some damage. And those two are really, really young too. So it's all the reason to believe that they might be back, next spring as well. And then, in swimming, you had a guy like Alex Sanchez who placed top 5 in both, in 2 events at the state swim meet. Ashlyn Hilliard, who I already mentioned, won state cross country. And I don't know, just so it really was those solo sports where Plano ISD made a lot of headway.
Girls golf,
yes.
Too. That team, just to be brief about them, they're for real. They had 3 really influential move-ins: district champion Michelle Zhang, Melina Barrientos, and Ashley Liu. All 3 are coming back. The majority of that program is coming back. I believe they return the 4 top players when you add Ellie Roth, silver medal at state this year. Only going to get better. Only going to become more familiar with that course. I would not be surprised in the slightest if we're sitting here talking about a team state champion or an individual state champion, or both, coming this time next year for them. So really great season. The boys won district, petered out a little bit younger, lost the Cody twins, some of the best athletes as far as golf the best athletes to ever go through West on the boys side. But that girls team is legit. They're going to be back, certainly.
And then you just look at some stuff that happened kind of off the field within Plano ISD, like the Plano Super Bowl. This was, this past Super Bowl between the New England Patriots and the LA Rams was, Plano ISD couldn't have asked for much more than having one guy on the Patriots, one guy on the Rams. You had Rex Burkhead, running back for the Pats, against Joseph Noteboom, who was a backup offensive tackle for the Rams. The city was really, really excited just to see those two having success. Obviously, we've talked about Rex Burkhead in years past on this podcast, and just the legacy that he left behind as one of the most prolific football players to ever come from Plano ISD. And then a guy like Joseph Noteboom to be able to have a rookie year like that ends on a stage like that. And it was I don't know how you guys felt about that game. Not necessarily maybe the most aesthetically pleasing for some, but nevertheless,
for most, let's put it that way.
But it was cool to see Rex had one of these signature runs in that game in the fourth quarter that helped the Patriots ice that the eventual 13-3 victory. And for the first time in Plano's history, they have a Super Bowl champion. And then there was the Plano West football coaching saga, and just that program's their build back to relevance. It's fair to say that
in the basest form of the word relevance. We're not even talking like relevance for a district title. We're talking like maybe win some district games for the first time in 2.5 years.
A district game.
Yeah. That search took longer than I thought. I think is the most notable thing. It wasn't until it was in November, I believe, around then when Scott Smith was reassigned. And February 19th, I want to say, if I'm getting the date right, was when they officially announced Tyler Sukup from Hebron. So really long search. I don't blame Gerald Brents and the PISD Athletics. I don't blame them, because this is a very critical hire, it feels like, in the scope of Plano West football. The program's in a really, really bad place in a lot of different ways as far as turnout. Obviously, record being the biggest thing, 0 for 26 going into next year.
2.5 years without a win.
So a huge hire. He's saying all the right things right now, and he's had a spring under his belt now to kind of start, engineering the kind of culture and program he wants. But we'll see. It was you're right. Saga, I think, is the right word for whatever all of that was, certainly. So
yes, very much a year of ups and downs and whatnot for Plano ISD. But yes, they really did a number on those solo sports in 2018-19. Devin, we can round this out with a look at Mesquite. But first off, let's take a quick break, give us all a chance to catch our breaths, and we'll pick that up and talk a little Mesquite ISD in just a moment. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we are back. We have talked Plano, we have talked Rowlett as part of our School Year in Review podcast series. So Devin, let's close this out with your other key market, Mesquite. What do you make of Mesquite ISD this year?
Well, if you just look at championships, it doesn't look like the greatest of year for Mesquite ISD. Obviously, there's 5.
Championships are tough to win, Devin. It's okay.
I'm talking about district championships. I'm not even talking about state championships. You look at, there's 5 schools in Mesquite ISD, and they combined to win 4 district championships this year. Horn girls basketball, Poteet girls basketball, West Mesquite boys soccer, and Mesquite boys track and field. They're tough districts. You know that in the 6A you're looking at the
Rockwalls and the Longviews.
Longview, Tyler Lee's got good programs in a lot of areas. And then when you dip down into 13-5A, well, 7-5A Division 1 football, John Tyler was kind of Poteet's nemesis there. And then if you look at the normal 13-5A, you'd have Forney is so good in so many sports, particularly on the diamond. And then you have Lancaster, who is so good at some of those sports, track and basketball, certainly boys basketball. So it wasn't. So when you look at it in that perspective, 4 district championships between 5 schools, you think, oh my gosh, you talk about underperforming, but they really didn't. Poteet qualified for the playoffs in all 8 standing-based sports. They just had the 1 district title, but they still were up there near competing and whatnot throughout. Horn qualified in 6 sports. Mesquite has some nice runs. If you look at storylines that kind of jumped out, I think Mesquite returning to the football playoffs under Jeff Leaner and his, they go from 1-9 in a year ago, and he gets that program headed in the right direction, and they're able to navigate a very good district that features the reigning state champion in Longview, Rockwall, who's a force-time, year in, year out. Horn, who's on a run of 12 consecutive playoff trips. So, and North Mesquite's been competitive. Tyler Lee's been competitive. Rockwall, he's been competitive. So for them to get back to that level, I thought was a big story. Sticking with football, Horn.
Yeah, that's
with the 0-7 start.
The weirdest year I think of any team that we've covered, man.
And not only do they go 0-7 and then bounce back and win their last 3 games to make the playoffs, they go 3 rounds deep. They knock off Temple in the first round. They take care of Wiley in the second round, and it was just a phenomenal. And it was, and Mike Overton retired after the season as the all-time winningest coach in Mesquite ISD history, and it was just, he was 1 win behind coming into the season behind Gary Childress, who was a long-time football coach at North Mesquite. And it was just, I had the story written back in August. Okay, this is when it's going to happen, and then it just didn't happen for 2 months. And even Coach O would say, he said, I knew about it. I knew what the rankings were, but he said, after a while, I started to think this is never going to happen. And he said, I knew I was going to retire at the end of the year. And I said, I'm going to retire without, And but it did finally happen. Obviously, a lot of the 0-7 start was due to schedule. They played a murderer's row in non-district, and then their district schedule was loaded toward the front with your Longviews and your Rockwalls and whatnot. They got it going late. They won the last 3. He finally eclipsed that mark. And so I thought it was a nice send-off to not just make the playoffs and extend that playoff streak that he started back when he was at West Mesquite, but also to go 3 rounds deep, because not a lot of teams did. Horn football and Mesquite boys soccer were the only teams from Mesquite ISD that went 3 rounds deep. And so, that was a nice story. I thought West Mesquite's boys soccer, who I alluded to a second ago, that was the first outright district championship that they'd ever won. They shared it on an occasion before, but Jeremiah Villarreal, their coach out there, has done an outstanding job with that group. And there's a lot of juniors. They're going to be. I thought they could make a run this year. In terms, they got knocked off in the second round, but I think that's a team to kind of keep an eye on next year. So. Across the board, you can't just look at district titles. You got to look at overall success, and each and every one of these schools had their high moments over the course of the year.
Context definitely matters in a situation like this. How about as far as just some of the more solo sports? I know Mesquite Horn had pretty solid track campaigns.
I think the. Mesquite's ISD is not real big. You'll have people come through swimming every now and again. You'll have golf and tennis.
There was one kid with Horn who was always doing in swimming, and he was always a name to watch at regionals. I remember in years past.
Yeah, I mean they've had Poteet had a kid named Clint Hallam a few years ago that was actually got a scholarship to LSU and set several school records at LSU. But again, they just don't have those big programs. Track and field is kind of where, as far as the individual sports, where Mesquite ISD makes its name. And this year was no different. By win, the senior out at Poteet won the state championship in the shot put.
Yep.
And that was her third trip to state. And so, that was a big achievement for her. Caleb Boger from Mesquite, their outstanding sprinter, who's going to Houston, won a bronze in the 200 meters. And so, it was. They had some highlights there in terms of that. They did really well at the district, area, and regional events as well. Like I mentioned, Mesquite won in the boys track and field. They also won at the area meet. Poteet across the board fared very well at the district and area meets. So as far as that goes, Mesquite always produces very good track athletes. And I mean, you go back to a couple of years ago with Horn, the girls, and the relays that was ranked number 1 in the nation. And there's a lot of they had a lot of young freshmen and sophomores that qualified for area and region. Couldn't quite make it to state this year, but they're going to be on the radar for next year and certainly state contenders.
Okay. Is there anything else with Mesquite that you wanted to throw out there, or just about do it?
Well, I guess one last note on football is, we always talk about coaching changes. We talked about Plano West earlier. For the first time in a few years, we got 2 new coaches in Mesquite. Cody Groves, and I guess I should mention, at the top, Steve Bragg, the athletics director.
That's pretty significant too.
Is retiring. Did just a tremendous job in not just hiring coaches, but in how he promotes Mesquite ISD. And y'all have been to games in Mesquite ISD, and you talk to media and other coaches around the state. They all love coming to Mesquite because just they're second to none when it comes, just down to every little detail is taken care of. And Steve Bragg is a big reason for that, that they have that reputation, and he's done a tremendous job hiring coaches, and you've seen the growth at all 5 campuses in those programs over the years. But he announced his retirement. Cody Groves, the Poteet head football coach, is going to take over, and he kind of hit the ground running with all I talked to him in April when they were hosting all the district and area track and field meets, which is enough to drive an athletic director out of the job. I think it's just all the little headaches there. But anyway, that opened the job at Poteet. At Rodney McLean, their defensive coordinator, took over as the new head coach out there. And it was interesting. I was talking to him about his spring game because that's basically the same path that Cody Groves took. He was the defensive coordinator at Poteet. Then Randy Jackson left to go to Plano East for that year, and Cody Groves took over. Well, 4 years later, kind of same path. Cody Groves leaves. They hired a defensive coordinator from within, and I think Rodney McLean think he's an outstanding coach, and I think he's going to do a tremendous job. And Horn went a similar route. When I mentioned Coach Overton retiring, Chris Hudler, who was their defensive coordinator, got promoted. And Chris Hudler has deep Mesquite ties. He was on the Mesquite 2001 state championship team. Okay. So he's deep rooted within the community, and he really wanted he got some looks at other head coaching positions, but he wanted to stay local. He's like I say, he's entrenched in Mesquite ISD, and he's going to take over that Horn program. And I think both will do a tremendous job, but you always wonder about the transition. North Mesquite went through this last year with Tim Cedar taking over after Mike Robinson left for DeSoto. And again, we talked about Mesquite. Jeff Fleener was just 2 years into the gig. So, you got a lot of young, new coaches in Mesquite ISD that are trying to get these programs either turned around or to keep, in Horn and Poteet's case, keep them going. So really interesting to see how that plays out in the fall.
With Coach Groves getting promoted to AD and just given the clout that a position like that carries, when you got word that, I guess whether it was Bragg retiring or Groves getting promoted, what was your initial reaction to just when you heard the news that it was Coach Groves that was getting that promotion?
It didn't necessarily surprise me. Okay. Cody's a guy that he's been sharp. When I talked to him when he first got hired as defensive coordinator, and he played over at Permian, he's got football roots, and he's one of those guys. There's certain coaches that just jump out at you by the way they talk.
Oh yeah.
And his attention to detail and whatnot. Within that Poteet program, it seemed like a perfect fit that he could translate very easily to the athletics department. And as far as their decision making goes, the administration, Mesquite ISD has always hired former football. Coach Bragg coached at North Mesquite. Before him, Mickey Delamar was the head coach at Mesquite. You go on and on back. Every athletic director has been a former Mesquite ISD football coach. So, they don't stray far in looking, but they want someone who knows the school district, who wants somebody who knows the community, and I think, Cody Groves certainly fits that bill.
Awesome. And that will do it for this edition of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast, a look back on the school year that was for a few of our markets. And that'll wrap it up for this episode. We'll be taking Monday off like the rest of y'all for Memorial Day, so everybody enjoy your long weekend. We'll be back next week to, we'll start talking a little bit of spring football, dive into a few of our districts and just kind of give a preliminary look as far as where things are at heading into the summer. And so we'll see you next Thursday. Otherwise, folks, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.